Bill Schuette, who would like to be the next Attorney General of the state of Michigan, is a Republican from Midland, has served as a congressman, a department director of the Agriculture Department, state senator, and the Court of Appeals judge, is with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Michael Patrick. I saw a buddy of yours last night, a guy named Lonto. He says to say hi. Say hi.
The king of Mount Pleasant and Central Michigan University, Jay Longto.
I'm carrying messages to you this morning. Good to be with you, Michael Patrick.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing him at one of these Central Michigan home games coming up here.
That's right. Fire up chips.
You bet. Why is it big news? Because a woman is getting executed, first and foremost, and it's the first in nearly a century, in fact. And secondly, where do you stand on the death penalty? Do you think we should have it available to us in Michigan?
I support the death penalty for certain murder, rapes, and certain very heinous crimes. That's been my position for years. We don't have that in the state of Michigan for state violations. Now, why is it big news? You rattle off a lot of important news here today, but obviously the issue of public safety is a key issue for me, and we need a safer Michigan, and we need more police on the streets, and we need to stop this process of closing prisons and releasing dangerous criminals earlier in our state of Michigan.
Is that job number one of the Attorney General?
As the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Michigan, the safety of our citizens and security of our families and neighborhoods, it's the chief job. It's the first job. The Attorney General has a big portfolio and lots of responsibilities, but that's the chief job in my opinion.
Have you been following at all what seems to be a contentious relationship between Attorney General Mike Cox and Blue Cross Blue Shield?
I follow it as much as most of your readers and listeners do. You bet.
And what do you make of that situation? Is Blue Cross just a sort of a bully position for the AG, or is he justified in his tenacity?
Well, Cox is a very tenacious guy. He's been a tough Attorney General. Blue Cross and any other nonprofit or for-profit, public company, private company, you have a responsibility as the Attorney General to make sure there aren't ripping off seniors, that there's not elder abuse, that there's a big job of consumer protection. Frank Kelly did put a stamp on that responsibility as the Attorney General. I'm going to maintain that as Michigan's next Attorney General. And whether it's Blue Cross or any other health care company, the point is, we can't have Medicaid fraud or health care fraud, and you can't rip off in terms of price and the price tag and the cost. And I'm going to make sure that citizens in Michigan have fair and reasonably affordable health care costs as Michigan's next Attorney General.
Well, won't the federal health care reform help you do that?
Well, the federal health care reform, one of the biggest things we can do in terms of reform in Michigan is to stop Obamacare, because it's a big spending, big government boondoggle. And we have $13 trillion worth of debt right now. I mean, just look at the ticker. And the fact is, this health care, socialized medicine, government takeover really separates doctor and patient, and it makes it more patient and bureaucrat, and it takes the doctor out of medicine. It's wrong. I'm going to fight that as Michigan's next Attorney General. And my opponent takes it a different way. He wants to dismiss the health care lawsuit, and so there's a big philosophical difference on 10th Amendment rights. I'm going to stand up for a Constitution, because I think that's a violation of the U.S. Constitution, the passage of the health care bill.
Well, how can you ensure reasonable rates for people who need health care in Michigan if you turn it over to the private sector and don't have government involvement?
From my standpoint, Michael Patrick, having the federal government is too much into our lives. It's too much into our pocketbooks, and it taxes us too much. And the point is, we ought to have incentives in the private sector, and we should not have the government being the one payer, the one provider, controlling health care. Then you end up like Europe or Britain, where the quality is not very good, and B, you're ration health care, and that's not what we need in the United States of America.
One of the things that your opponent says we need in the state of Michigan, the Genesee County prosecutor David Layton, who's running as the Democrat for Attorney General, is some sort of witness protection program to overcome what he calls the no-snitch culture, particularly in those heavy crime areas. Do you think we could have, do you like his idea of having the sort of witness protection program so people will, rat each other out?
the city of Flint's the fourth most dangerous city in the United States of America, and families in Flint and people in Flint deserve a safe community like any other place in our state and any other place in the United States. But the fact is, the murder rate there is so high, and my opponent, in all due respect, hasn't been doing the job. I think you've heard about this story where there is a woman named Brenda Simpson who's a victim of crime.
Mm-hmm.
Her son was brutally murdered, poisoned, thrown in the river, and never got justice because the prosecutor from Flint, my opponent, failed to bring charges. And she had to go, and the door of justice was slammed in her face. She had to go to the Attorney General, Mike Cox, to get justice. And on the same facts, same evidence, same circumstances, Mike Cox got a conviction, prosecuted the murders of her son, a small boy who was poisoned and thrown in a river, and finally got justice by the Attorney General of Michigan because my opponent didn't do the job. So the first order of business as a prosecutor is to get the job done. He's not done that, and that's why, again, I'm convinced that people are going to vote the other way and come my way because we need to have someone who's prepared to put public safety the first job as Attorney General.
I'm reading here a little bit about a murder case that you vowed to reopen because Prosecutor Layton mishandled it. Is that a different case than the one you're talking about?
Well, that's a different case, and what happened here is, again, another victim of crime, and there needs to be someone who's a voice for victims in the state of Michigan because sometimes they're forgotten too soon, but in this instance, there was a family of a victim of crime, a mom and a dad whose son was murdered in a shooting, and they agreed reluctantly to a plea bargain at a lesser charge for one if two other accomplices would be indeed prosecuted. And the prosecutor from Flint agreed to this in open record in a court of law, but then failed to do the job. Reneged on the deal, never prosecuted the other two, and so this woman, Debbie McIntosh, and her husband, they had justice denied to them. The door was slammed in their face because the prosecutor in Flint didn't finish the job. So the point is, we need to have someone who finishes the job. And a couple months ago, Michael Patrick, the community leaders in Flint asked for the National Guard to be deployed in the city of Flint. So the fact is, I have the support of the Fraternal Order of Police, the Police Officers Association of Michigan, 48 prosecutors across the state. So those who are on the front lines of crime are supporting me as Michigan's next Attorney General.
I noticed that you mentioned Attorney General Frank Kelly, they called him the Eternal General. He was in office so long. He's a Democrat, true blue, and yet you point to him as someone that you idolize or you would seek to uphold the standards of. This position of Attorney General really isn't really a partisan position, even though it's Democrat running against Republican. It's bigger than that, isn't it?
Well, you put your finger on it perfectly. Frank Kelly did a terrific job as Attorney General. Recognized and set a standard of fighting for consumers, whether that's the elderly, the young, making sure that utility rates are fair and even. And so Frank did a superb job. And, performing in that office isn't about politics. It's about keeping people safe. It's protecting the consumers. I also want to put in a feature in the Attorney General's office that helps get permits issued for job providers in a rapid, specific time certain. I'm going to call it RPM, Rapid Permits for Michigan. It means that if you're going to want to build a plant in Michigan, you want to relocate or expand, you'll get a decision from the DEQ, which is really the anti-jobs DEQ, or whatever alphabet stupid name they have. Let's get permits in a specific, a certain swift time. Get a yes or no from government. Too many times we don't get any answer.
That's outstanding. Bill Schuette says he has the answers to be the next Attorney General. He's a former state senator, former congressman. He was the head of the Ag Department and a judge. And we will talk again soon to you. Thank you very much for the time.